2020 school committee meeting. As we get started here, I'm going to read, as you'll see, we are obviously all remote. I'm going to read the executive order on remote participation and remote conduct for opening meetings. Prior to doing that, I'm going to confirm member access. As a preliminary matter, this is David Thompson, school committee chair. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Eric Crane.
Yes.
Jeff Kay.
Yes.
Arthur Skarmas.
Yes.
Great. And Mary Beth Ferry was not able to join us tonight. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Lisa Dana.
Yes.
Keith Taverna.
Yes.
Mary Wormers.
Yes.
Great. This open meeting of the Danvers School Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March.
Are you on now?
Yeah,
So you didn't say anything, right?
they were waiting for me though.
We got a little feedback there, so I'm going to start over. This open meeting of the Danvers School Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent of Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth, due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings at a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with the agenda for this meeting on the town's website, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely, so long as reasonable public access is afforded, so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will not feature public comment. For this meeting, the Danvers School Committee is convening remotely via Zoom, as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that others may be able to see you and care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured during the recording. In terms of meeting materials, all supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the district's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. As for the meeting ground rules, we are now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to assure accurate meeting minutes. The chair will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in colloquy with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. For items with public comment, we have established an email address for public comment, which is info@danvers.org. This email address is also posted with the agenda and shown online with the streaming of this meeting. Residents will email comments and they will be provided or read out aloud after staff has confirmed their names and addresses. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by a roll call vote. All right, now I believe we can begin. And we will start with information from the superintendent.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Mary Wormers to put up our presentation. So our school committee members have been provided with our draft initial preliminary reopening plan that needs to be submitted to DESE tomorrow on July 31st. It is a two-step process that we'll talk about during this meeting. So we look forward to this presentation to share with school committee and our school community about our reopening with an update for today. Again, the final plan is due to DESE on August 10th, with the school committee meeting again next Thursday on August 6th. Okay, thank you. This next slide, please, Mary. This presentation will review state guidelines, and then we'll present the results of our Danvers feasibility study and our surveys, along with our preliminary reopening plan. Again, many of the details will be provided in the next step of this process. Today is an overview in talking about the 3 models that must be provided to DESE tomorrow. Looking at the beginning of this and sort of to bringing us through the process, in working with our Department of Education at the state level, we have been directed to submit a preliminary plan with 3 options, which will be described this evening, and also a 100% remote alternative. The focus has been to how do we educate during this unprecedented health pandemic. So first, we need to continue to address the health and safety criteria, and looking at how we balance this. And I'll read through this slide with everyone that we're looking at, again, the safe return of as many students as possible in an in-person school setting. We realize that this is a transition from where we have been through the spring, and then a transition coming back to the school setting. We're also looking at, the state has put out fall guidance that is based on extensive review of the current medical literature. This continues to evolve. There seems to be new studies on an ongoing weekly basis. We're also looking at how do we balance the health and safety risks of the COVID-19 with the health and safety, socioeconomics, and the academic risk of keeping students out of school. So all of this is a very complex situation, unprecedented, that we continue to work through together. And with that, working through together, it's not one strategy, but it's the mitigation of this is through a number of strategies coming together to substantially lower the risk of transmission. The next slide will talk about what those criteria are. So as we have put together the preliminary plans and have worked with many individuals throughout our community, and we'll be explaining that again during this presentation, these are the 4 areas that we continue to have at the top of the list of bringing people back to our teachers, all of our school community, and our students back into our school buildings. First, that there must be mask and face coverings. This is the major part of one of the mitigation strategies, the physical distancing. You'll hear tonight that although looking at 3 feet from the feasibility study, our plan that we will be recommending to school committee is looking at this 6 feet requirement. We need to continue with hand washing and hand sanitizing, and having everyone stay home when sick. So again, we're going to be giving an overview of this for next week, is when all of the details, that's a much longer document that will describe all of the details that the different committees have been working on to put together in the different departments within town, also with us as a school department. Okay. So as we look at the 3 plans, just want to also add, as we continue to balance from the previous slide, the health and safety, having the criteria for those 4 major criteria. We also continue to work with our Department of Public Works on cleaning protocols, the HVAC system. So we're gathering all of that data for the community. And then we're also looking at cohorts. How do we schedule students? Again, coming in the next part of this 2-step process. Along with, we're continuing to shift education. What does this look like in a healthcare pandemic? What essential services, the specialized services, how do we continue to provide those for our students? The impact on social emotional learning, mental health. We are looking at the reduction of when we're not in school, the detection of child abuse, the nutritional insecurity, and parental employment. So there are many factors that are coming into putting together today's plan. With that, the return to the school plans, again, down the road, looking at a return to what we maybe have known in the past, but at coming up for this coming September, we'll be looking at a continuum. And although we sort of say continuum, we really look at this as evolving, and it has to be fluid. We will probably at any time during the school year need a hybrid plan, need a remote plan, and hopefully the in-person learning for all of our students and adults in our school community with all of the new safety requirements. So we will be describing those 3 models tonight, along with a 100% remote alternative and how we would have a plan for the necessary services and accommodations for special populations of students. Okay, and again, I'm just going to turn it over to Keith and Mary in just one moment as we go through this, and then I'll come back at the end and bring closure to it before we open this up to the school community. As we go through this, you'll see the many challenges that we are facing and going forward. There's no ideal model that we have. It becomes increasingly complex, seems by day. And again, we're going to continue to minimize the effects on our students' learning. And as we do this, we're changing structures. If we think about it, it's probably been education in a traditional way over 100 years with sort of the industrial model, moving into what we've talked about with our strategic plan into the 21st century, and now even changing a school calendar, what that might look like. So again, we look forward to giving the overview this evening and then talking about next steps for our next meeting next Thursday. So I'm going to turn it over to Keith at this time.
As we have each meeting that we've had, we've provided you with another list of the names of everybody on the committees that are helping with this planning process. We have over 60 individuals represented as part of the committees, from teachers, specialist teachers, special education teachers, different content areas, parents, DPW, the Board of Health, different town departments, CPAC, administrators. We really have a diverse group that's helping us, and we want to thank all of them for all of their time and commitment to this. It's not just a 1 hour meeting on a Tuesday morning or a Wednesday morning. It really is then a whole bunch of work in between. So we're so thankful to all of them for their help. And again, I think with all of the committees, the priority is the health and safety of our students and staff, and that continues to be our focus as we look at what our plans will be. So as we've talked about, we did a feasibility study, and in one sense, when you hear from DESE, they talk a lot about the physical space with that. Our feasibility study also took into account family and staff input via surveys and via the committees. So we really think that's a key part of our feasibility study, as well as then the physical pieces. So we conducted social distancing measurements in all of our schools. As a whole, we could get to about 4 feet if we were to bring back full capacity. In most rooms, some were a little bit less, but we could obtain full capacity. In a hybrid model, we are able to accommodate all or half the students in that model at 6+ feet. So meeting that CDC guidance. The Department of Education has released that 3 feet is acceptable for schools in conjunction with the American Pediatrics Association of Massachusetts. But again, we did the study both ways. And then we also looked at evaluating different models of how students would be able to eat their lunch while in school, looking at eating in the classrooms and different logistics that come with that, as well as eating in our cafeteria. So you'll see we show capacities of somewhere between 25 and about 50 students at the elementary level, and then 60 to 70 students at the middle school and high school. Just this week, the Department of Ed released last week, additional guidance around lunch service, and if students were going to eat in cafeterias, that the use of plexiglass would be acceptable. So we've started to work in conjunction with DPW to look at what that could look like in our cafeterias, and you'll see that that increases the capacity at the middle school from 60 to 70 students to about 120. This will still mean in any of the models for the middle school and high school that lunch will have to be eaten outside of the cafeteria in order to fit the cohorts in and run the schedule as we have in the past. So we asked 3 of our principals or 3 of our administrators, so the middle school, Great Oak, and the high school, to kind of create a video to show what some of our facilities could look like in the fall. You'll see in this that there's cafeterias, there's classrooms set up at 6 feet, and there's classrooms set up at the 3 to 4 feet. So I believe this is about 2 minutes, and thank you to Whitney in our office who kind of took all of them and pieced them together for us. So in that, you'll see that some classrooms worked as we hoped they would. Other classrooms didn't. So the principals have begun an evaluation process to ensure with the model that we picked that they'll be able to fit all students safely. As we talked about before, at the 6+ feet, or if there needs to be a rotation of classrooms to allow that spacing to happen based on class sizes. So they're in the midst of those, really those little details at the moment, and we're actually working on providing stickers that we'll be able to put on the floors to show the setups at the different increments, and then to be able to easily reset the room should desks get moved to ensure that we're always putting them back to maximizing the space between desks. So as part of our surveys that we did for faculty and staff and families, we did put together just a brief joint slides to show the results side by side. So you'll see that out of the survey results that were done earlier in July, so we understand that sometimes this data could change as more information becomes available and people learn more, but at the time, 21% of staff and faculty preferred to return to school remotely, while 12 families indicated that that would be their preference. And that's solely remote, not hybrid, not in school at all, but a full remote program. Returning to school in person, and this is a combination slide of what the results were for hybrid and for full in person. And you'll see that 79% of faculty and staff and 84% of families. And again, just to highlight, faculty and staff are all of our employees that we surveyed, not just teachers, but the aides, the cafeteria workers, the Title I tutors, the bus and van drivers, our administrative assistants, all of our employees. And that's where those percentages are based on. Returning to school in a hybrid model, we did a survey of what model that faculty and staff as well as families would prefer. So you'll see that the half-day AM, PM was slightly the preference for families. The 2-day in-person and 3 days remote was pretty close to the AM, PM with families, and well above for faculty and staff, almost double what the half-day AM, PM was. And then 1 week in and then 1 week remote was kind of lower on the spectrum. And then, you know, there was a fair share of people that had no preference at all. So now we're gonna turn it, I think, over to Mary, and Mary's gonna run through some of our goals as we've been working through the reopening and what some of the all three models could look like.
Great. So when we started the task of developing the 3 plans, we decided that it was really important to have consistency in our teaching and learning across all 3, so that as we transition, and we could transition to all 3 models as we go through the school year, the kids have the same structures and routines in each of the models, so that there's no difference in the teaching and learning that's happening across the models, although the platforms the way the kids are, present in school are different. So that was one of our main goals. And then we had a few others that we really wanted to work on developing a safe, supportive, culturally sustaining, and equitable learning environments. And again, through those consistent routines to really build those strong relationships among students and teachers. And again, as we know from the remote learning that, that meeting as a class in a remote setting was very different. So we're really going to be working on developing those routines and supportive learning environments through all the models that we're teaching. We want to really work on supporting students learning through differentiated and small group instruction. I know that we feel like this is really where we're putting a lot of all our eggs in the basket, is really working on reaching out to kids and meeting kids where they're at in their learning and really moving them forward. And we think the best way to do that is through this differentiated and small group instruction. And then finally, we want to keep working on the vision that we have in our strategic plan, is to really emphasize the 21st century learning skills, especially since we are learning in a 21st century way when we're learning remotely, to really work on developing skilled communicators and problem solvers, and that they really are able to apply their learning in authentic and real life situations. One key to having the consistency across all 3 learning models is to be using Google Classroom for the students to retrieve their learning materials, and for our older learners for them to turn in their assignments through Google Classroom, and that we are looking to really do lots of training for students, for teachers, and for parents to make sure that we all understand how to use Google Classroom. So to getting into the models, the first model we had to develop is an in-person learning model. And this is kind of like how school has been in the past. All students are in person, but we really have to put those health and safety measures in place by distancing students. As the DESE recommends a minimum of 3 feet, we were able to average out a minimum of 4 feet in our buildings if we were to go back in this model. But then we also would have this health and safety measures of wearing masks and having hand sanitation, and then some deep cleaning of the rooms between sessions. Teachers would return to school in person. Some teachers that cannot return and work remotely may lead us to have some staffing challenges. Other challenges are, as Keith talked to you about, was the social distance lunch. So again, as Keith said, that we're going to have to either increase the number of lunches each day or use other large spaces like the gym or the multipurpose room at Holton Richmond. And then if we are using the gym for lunch, then that will impact classes for those specialists. And again, at the last meeting, we really spent a long time talking about the impact that on transportation when we have the health and safety measures in place. And so then transporting students so in a socially distanced, safe manner is also going to be difficult within our current transportation budget. So model 2 that we developed is a hybrid. So you take your in-person model and your remote model and kind of combine them and make a hybrid learning model. And so in Danvers, we have looked at different models. We looked at an AM/PM model. I'm just going to move my, I guess that it is not on the slide. We looked at an AM/PM model. We looked at the 2-day in school, the 3 days remote. And then we also looked at 1 week on and 1 week off as a model. And as we worked with different groups of people, we were talking pros and cons for each of those models. And we settled in on the 2 days in school and 3 days remote is the one with the fewer challenges for us to return to school in. So students would come 2 days in and be 3 days remote. Teachers would work 4 or 5 days in school. And again, those details are still being worked out for our longer plan. I have a graphic here that shows you what it would look like. Cohort A would be in school on Monday and Tuesday, and then they would work remotely Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Cohort B would be working remotely Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and they would be in school on Thursday and Friday. You see that Wednesdays is a different day where everyone's remote. So what we were envisioning for this so far is that AM would be the small group instruction and check-ins with students. And then in the afternoon, we would have teachers working to plan so that they can plan for the next week. And teachers, when they're doing their planning, are planning for both the in-school learning and the remote learning. So there's a little bit more, planning to be done by teachers. And that's why that Wednesday afternoon planning time is really needed. On Wednesdays, we also envision a deep cleaning of the classrooms because we'll be switching cohorts. And so they would give DPW time to really have that deep clean before a whole new set of kids come in for the next day. In this model, we're able to meet that 6 feet of social distancing between students because the cohorts are smaller, but we do still have challenges. Childcare for both families and our faculty members and staff. And then the staffing is going to be an issue too with trying to manage the in-person, in-school learning as well as the remote learning. Finally, we had to develop a fully remote learning plan. This plan is going to look very different than the way it looked in the spring. We're working to, again, develop those consistent routines and having a schedule for students. As I said earlier, we're going to be using Google Classroom to communicate learning expectations to students and for our older students to submit their remote learning work. We'll be using Google Meet for synchronous, small group differentiated learning sessions. We will be providing asynchronous lessons via videos. We will be conducting SEL check-ins each day at the elementary level twice a day. And then we're going to be providing adult guidance for our student work. So we'll be continually checking in on students and making sure through the day to make sure that they're on track with doing the remote learning work. And again, part of the DESE recommendation or requirement is that we check attendance each day, and we'll be doing that at each synchronous session that students attend. Finally, we do realize there are challenges for the hybrid and remote learning sessions, the hybrid session when the children are in their remote phase. We know that childcare for families and our faculty will be very challenging. And I just thought we'd share some data from the survey that we had 806 families reply that they will have childcare issues if we use the hybrid model. And so right now we're working with Danvers Recreation and the Danvers YMCA to try to think about how we might have some sort of program. Another challenge is that our younger students is something that we've been talking a lot about, and needing some extra support to complete their learning activities while they are learning remotely. So we're thinking about using use of teacher aides and other adults to monitor our younger students through the remote learning work. Technology can always be a challenge, no matter how much you have. If a child's Chromebook needs repair, then sometimes that can be an issue. We have 600 students that rely only on a school-issued Chromebook. They don't have another device. So then having enough Chromebooks in stock to swap out while the student's Chromebook is getting repaired to give them a loaner could present a challenge. And the other challenge could be for people to have high-speed internet, reliable, I guess I should say, high-speed internet access, because we all have internet, or the majority of our families have internet access. It's having that reliable high speed, and I think some of our teachers also struggled with having that that high speed, so that when we're doing those synchronous sessions on Google Meet, then their computers and their Chromebooks are able to support that. So I think, Lisa, are you going to start here? Oh, no, I'm still doing this one. I'm sorry. So the plan, the state has put forward a plan for a fully remote alternative program for families. And so regardless of the model that we choose to implement in Danvers, families will also have an opportunity to enroll in a fully remote alternative program that the state is providing. We were just informed of this week. And the state is still negotiating with 2 different contractors for what that learning platform will be. So more information will be forthcoming, and we're hoping by the next Thursday meeting that we'll be able to give the public more information about that. Finally, a big part of our work is really thinking about how we will work with students in special populations. The Department of Education is also providing guidance around that. They believe that high needs students should be prioritized for extra support in any of our models. And those groups of students would be preschool age students. They would be our English language learners, our IEP students with significant and complex needs, our homeless students, and our economically disadvantaged students. We are working right now on criteria for this designated high needs student cohort. If we go into a hybrid learning model, then students would be coming to school more often. They would, then the 2 in-person days, they would be working with us for 4 days of the week in person. And if we are remote, we also need to be thinking about how we service our high needs students. And so they would like us to consider an option, the Department of Education, for our students with more significant and complex disabilities, to maybe bring them in person for instruction, even though we're in a fully remote model. Again, that's all going to be dependent on the health and safety precautions, and if it can be done, we will bring some students in to be taught in person. But if it can't, we will be working on a remote model with structured lessons, teletherapy, and lots of help and guidance from our teachers. I think, Do you want, Lisa, did you want me to do this one or?
No, I missed putting it back on
Okay.
unmuting. So thank you. Thank you to Mary and Keith for the overview of the surveys, the feasibility study, and the work with the subcommittee on the 3 different plans along with the 100% remote alternative. So this is the summary of our presentation for this evening. In our July 31st report to DESE, the Danvers Public Schools will state that we are currently leaning toward reopening school in the hybrid learning model. And actually that's the wording that the state has, leaning toward. Tonight's presentation and the report will be on our website as of the first thing tomorrow morning. And then Mary, the last slide, please, is the next steps with updating the website for everything that we have spoken about tonight. We will be reviewing questions and comments, and we'll go over that this evening too with the number of ones that have come in today. The school committee vote on the reopening plan is at next Thursday, August 6th, and we have then to submit the plan to DESE, the full plan, on August 10th. The week of August 10th, we'll be sending out a family, we say survey, but it's really a form that will be talking about choosing the model that we have or the full remote model, and then also questions about transportation and any other pieces about putting students into the different cohorts as a hybrid model. During August, we'll be looking at having school-based forums to be able to really talk about the details, sharing that, and being able to have those conversations in smaller groups with parents, and then finalizing as of this week, DESE has negotiated at the state level with the state unions that we would have 10 days of professional development prior to the school opening. So the new, which again would be voted on at the school committee meeting on next Thursday with a revised calendar, would be September 16th. So I thank everyone for your patience as we review. There's a great deal of information, and tonight really is the overview with not every detail out there as we'll be pulling that together for the next meeting. And want to again thank everyone. The 2 words that we have really been looking at throughout this has been the collaboration, everyone working together, and also the flexibility that we understand the challenges when we're not able to give a final piece, or in days it seems to change. So again, we want to thank everyone for the collaboration and flexibility. Thank you.
Great.
So Mary, I just said, oh, there she goes. Perfect. We're back to seeing everyone.
Excellent. Lisa, Mary, and Keith, thank you very much. We know that you have all been doing a tremendous amount of work this summer. This has certainly not been your typical summer, as have so many of the people that are on the committee. So thank you for all of that. I just wanted to, before I get to questions, just, remind everyone that, we've never done this before. No school district has ever done this before. And everyone is trying to do the best possible thing for our students and our staff and everyone involved. And there's going to still be a lot of fluidity in the plan because it could change tomorrow. So everyone just needs to be aware of that. I know a lot of people are anxious about it, again, because it's all new territory, but please be assured that everyone involved is doing the best they can to make this work in the best way possible. So with that, Eric, would you like to start with questions?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first of all, I would like to thank Lisa and Keith and Mary and the whole team, everybody who worked on these plans. Pulling this together and trying to come up with this in a thoughtful way was a tremendous amount of work, and very impressed with what I see. And frankly, I know that there's a lot of work still to be done, because the final plan that will be submitted is going to have a lot more detail, whereas it looks like this initial plan, really at the state's request, what they're looking for is sort of a high-level overview as to what the plans could look like. So thank you all very much for what you've done. With that, some questions. Is it fair to say, like when I read this draft plan with the models, that opening full-time with all the students back in the classrooms is really not a desirable model. Really not feasible to maintain the proper social distancing. Um, and really wouldn't work from a lunch standpoint, from a mask break standpoint, from the need for grabbing additional spaces in order to try and meet the social distancing requirements. As I read that, it sounded like of the three models, that one really is the least feasible to accomplish everything other than, okay, you'd be able to teach everybody at once. So is that a fair statement, do you think?
Yes, it is a fair statement. So again, looking at all three models, but why we're presenting the hybrid as where we're leaning toward is because of meeting the safety, the health and safety pieces, the in-person, we would not be ready for doing that.
Yeah. And I, looking over I think one of the issues is the state basically on the theory that young people don't transfer COVID as readily as older people. That's why the state said, well, 3 feet might be adequate. But there's pretty good science at this point that students from age 10 to 19 can transfer the disease just about as easy as other adults. So I think that 3-foot model, and I assume the committee would agree, makes no sense. So I would agree with you that the idea of bringing everybody back at once just doesn't make sense. It's not particularly feasible. Keith, if I could ask on the hybrid, what would transportation look like in theory?
So in theory, it would be running our buses at about a third capacity as we do this year.
Mhm.
But if we go from 100% of our students to only 50%, we'll actually be coming back to the policy subcommittee on Monday and back to school committee next Thursday about revising our transportation policy to prioritize students that live more than 2 miles from the school in all grade levels K to 12 based on what the survey of need is. But it would be about a third of the students, which is again another reason why the full in-person didn't work, is that we had no way to get the kids to school in that model on the bus.
Okay, so assuming that we started with the hybrid model, at some point, no doubt, the desire would be to bring everybody back all together at once. And what do we see as having to change? What has to develop to make that possible from our standpoint in Danvers?
For transportation or for overall?
Or in general?
So I think that we would need to continue to watch what the public health data shows and really looking at the 6 feet piece. If the 6 feet is what we stick with, we will not be able to bring everybody back unless we looked at significant additional staffing as well as potentially additional space rentals to make that happen while maintaining the 6 feet.
Okay. And I presume we don't have a time frame in mind from when we would go from the hybrid to full learning. It depends on basically what's happening with the COVID.
Correct.
Correct,
And then
yes.
we'll look at reevaluating it and it will be a fluid plan. We'll make a decision of how we're going to start. And then as the data changes with COVID, as well as just check in with all of our employees and our families to see how it's going, we'll look at doing a check-in mid-fall to see how it's going and kind of taking it in small increments to reevaluate, reassess, and tinker with it, right, to make it better. So continue to strive to make it a better environment.
Okay. Now, are there any plans as we start to bring the students back? Obviously, we're going to have masking, we're going to have social distancing. Do we anticipate doing any testing of either staff or student in a general way when they come back, or will it only be students and staff will be tested if they show signs of having the COVID?
So the state is currently working, DESE, I would say. The state is working with the state.
Sure.
DESE is working with one of the undersecretaries about what testing could look like in education. But at this time, it would be testing students that had symptoms, recommending that they get tested or requiring them complete a full 14-day quarantine before they're allowed to return if they're displaying any sort of symptoms or with a negative test.
And I know the state, although I haven't seen it yet, I think the state put out, I want to say like a 19-page document as to dealing with the health issues. And it involves everything from bus drivers monitoring students' health to what to do if someone tests positive, et cetera, et cetera. So I know that's going to be out there, and I presume it would be refined. I do note that there was an article in the Globe Sunday noting that 75 doctors across Massachusetts were urging the governor to expand surveillance testing to prepare for schools to open. I also note that for the first time yesterday, state numbers exceeded 300 new cases for the first time since June 27th, and more than 350 for the first time since June 11th. So we have to be watching for what I see happening is numbers are creeping up as people are getting more bold during the summer, and we have to continue to watch that, I think. Lisa, in your presentation, you mentioned that you believe that at some time during the course of this year, we're probably going to have to avail ourselves of all three models, right? So the premise is that we'll actually use all these three models at some point.
That's a likelihood, yes. So
Okay.
again, I think that's the piece of why we need all three models to submit to the state, why we had to go through this exercise to do this, and then deciding on a starting point. The starting point could change, and at any time, as you're saying, based on, and as Keith said, based on the public health data that's coming in about transmission rates, it could change in either direction from
Okay.
a hybrid.
Yeah, I mean, as we sit here today, if the premise is that we're going to have to use all three of these at some point during the year, a likelihood, I think you said is likely in your view, then my own view would be to start remote fully. I would like to see us start remote fully for approximately a month or so, then do a check-in, and then consider, hey, the numbers are still good. State numbers have not gone up generally, because one concern is once this happens, what happens to the numbers statewide as well as locally? And my concern would be, is it worse to start in a hybrid and then have to almost immediately within a month or two go right back to remote? I would rather, personally, it's me, would rather see us start remotely, reassess in approximately a month, which would take us to the middle of October, and then consider moving right to the hybrid model if everything seems steady at that point. I say that recognizing full well that every model, any model that we choose, is not going to work for someone. Whatever we do, someone is not going to like it. Someone's going to have childcare problems. Someone's going to feel it's not the best educationally, but that's my own opinion. Now, the other question I had, this I hadn't realized this before, and I think it's new. So Mary, did I understand correctly that when, if we were to do a hybrid, so say you had a fourth grade class in Danvers, say the entire fourth grade in Danvers. Let's say that 12% of those fourth graders, for reasons that perhaps they live in a high-risk household, a parent or a child has an immune issue, they are taken care of by grandparents. There are reasons those students can't come back at all. So is what you're saying that 10 or 12% of fourth graders who are not going to come back at all, even in the hybrid program, they're going to be educated through state and not through the Danvers Public Schools?
Lisa, do you want to go?
So, right, let me, and then Mary could fill into it. The
Sure.
state is looking at supporting school districts by having a learning management system for the virtual, the remote learning. So it would be a curriculum based on the curriculum frameworks, but it would be our responsibility to implement that. So the state, as Mary said, there are what we were informed of this week, that they're down to having 2 vendors, but they have to finalize those contracts. So we do hope in the very near future, we would be informed of them, and at our next meeting, we could share that with the school committee and the community as to what the vendors are, what the curriculum would be, so parents can make that decision before we send out that next parent family survey.
Yeah, well, assume, and again, so is what you're saying, we don't know at this point whether they would be taught by our staff or the staff of one of the vendors? We just don't know yet?
Until we see who the two vendors are, then we would be able to get back to you with all of those details. Yes.
Okay,
But it really is more of a, I'm going to say it's more of a curriculum with the remote learning options, learning activities that are there, and
Okay.
that we will have to, and again, that was part of a long document from the state too, of
Sure.
if you're in certain situations, what's your readiness for that? That's what we'll be pulling together for next week.
I recognize there's an awful lot fluid here. So again, thank you for all you've done. I think, now, do we vote on the draft that you're going to submit tomorrow, or is our only vote on in August for the approval of the final plan?
We put on today's agenda a vote. I think as we have done in the past, if school committee is ready to do a vote, yes, the official one that we do need is the one next week, which
Mhm.
is the large plan that the community sees all of the details there. But I think in the past, what we've done is sort of give, whether it's informal or formal vote tonight, but we get that consensus from our school committee members that you are okay with us moving forward in a certain direction.
Okay. All right. Mr. Chair, I'm good for now. I may have some more questions based on whatever else spins out from my colleagues.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Arthur, would you like to go next?
Sure, thanks. Like Eric, first, I would like to, I think I really want to say that I really think that you all, Keith, Lisa, Mary, and the entire staff, I mean, to me, you've all done remarkable work here, because it's really a massive undertaking that began from a standing start, from a point where we didn't even know, again, 5 months ago, none of this was even in the vocabulary. And not only that, but you've also dealt with continuous changing of facts and circumstances, and continuous changes in what's been provided to you from the state. So, I just, regardless of, anything else that happens, it's just been a real, I really do think you've all done a really, really great job in sticking with this and working through this, and getting us to the point where what we all want to do is do the best that we can for the kids.
Mhm.
I think that just a couple of quick questions, then I have a few my comments on this. First of all, preschool, is preschool the same? Is the schedule the same? Is everything the same with preschool? And I might have missed it, I'm not sure, but I'm just wondering how the preschool is going to work.
Keith, would you take that one?
So we're currently reviewing that. They actually had a meeting, I believe, today with two of the principals, Mary Tatum, and then Amanda, who's on the CPAC as a parent, to talk about that. One draft idea was, yes, to keep the model fairly similar, but to reduce the program by about 15 minutes on each session to allow for additional cleaning to take place between cohorts. Those cohorts are already on the smaller end based on the student needs, and those students being higher need on IEPs would fit into those categories under a hybrid of coming to school for the 4 days.
Okay, all right, and so that's still, you're still kind of ferreting that out a little bit. Okay.
Right.
The other, Mary, I was just, now I forget the word that you were using for what the remote, like these kind of, what is the word for the remote learning, the kind of get-togethers or whatever they were?
Synchronous, like when they're live, and then asynchronous is when the videos.
Yeah. So can you just give me like as best you can, kind of like what would a typical day look like for the student that's doing remote learning? As best as you can. Obviously, I know that you can't tell me they get up at 7 and eat their wheat checks and go from there, but just so I have a better understanding of what the day would be like.
Sure. Let's start, like, take elementary. They would start their day with a check-in for like a homeroom period where teachers would take attendance, but then they would also be doing a social emotional learning block. So about 15-20-minute lesson there. From there, they would go into a live like word study session, like, so the phonics for the K-2 and the word study for 3 to 5. And then from there, they would go into their ELA block. And from there, in that, we do have asynchronous videos for kids to be watching what we call the mini lesson, which is part of what's reading workshop. So students would be watching that independently while teachers work with small groups of kids. So they would be pulling, 3, 4 kids that have similar needs in the reading workshop content that they're working on. And they would grab those kids and do some small group instruction for like 15 minutes or so to really get them going and really understand, help them get over any kind of challenge that they're facing and move them forward. So then the teacher would set them on the independent work and then get more students, another small group of students to do their work. So we thought that during the ELA block that the teacher could probably work with 4 groups of kids for that ELA hour. Actually between 2, the word study and the ELA, we'd probably give the kids a break for a few minutes so they could get off, they could walk away from the computers for a little while before they come back. Then we feel like that would bring us up to around a lunch period. And then from there, they would come back and do math, and math would be the same type of idea, that the lesson would be an asynchronous video kind of lesson, and that the teachers would be pulling small groups of kids, again, based on, their understanding of the mathematical concept, any kind of misconceptions they might have. We group them together to help them get over that. So again, the teacher would do about 4 groups of kids a day, depending on how, it will possibly be their whole class that they will see in those small groups because of depending on the numbers of students. And then I think there was something else we were going to do, but then, specialists, have the specialists, the kids kind of go with the specialists and have some time with them. And then after that, they would probably end their day with another social emotional learning block and kind of wrapping up the learning of the day, talking about what they learned, and then doing like a checkout and then send them back. And we were envisioning the day to be the school day that we have the kids in when they're in person. So the hybrid would follow the in-person schedule. So it would be 8:30 to 2:30 for the elementary schools.
All right, and upper class, I mean, what would they be, just going from subject to subject, or?
We're looking at, we're back and forth about, what the schedule will look like. One thought is, how we have a 7-period schedule, but we only see 6 periods and 1 drops every day. So we're thinking about, can we shorten the periods and have 7 periods every day? Or do we continue on with the 6-period block? So those conversations are still ongoing. We've been back and forth on that. And then they would see their teacher, they would just be in their class, whatever block of time that they would normally be in. So there would be independent work. Again, the lessons you can't sustain, 20 kids on a, Google Meet for 45, 50 minutes. So it would be some independent work and then small group instruction as well, just like we would do at the elementary level.
Okay, and I'm admittedly I'm slowing down as I get older, but it's you'll know this when you're 2 days older, Eric.
I don't doubt it, Arthur.
When you have so what about who's teaching who here? All right, so obviously we get teachers in school and we get teachers doing remote, and sometimes it seems like we need twice as many teachers. So how does that work?
That's why we put staffing as a challenge when we're in the hybrid model, but we will have teachers that are teaching remotely. So they'll have like a group of kids that they will be working with remotely. And so we're working on the details of what that looks like. We also have teacher aides. We have Title I teachers, reading teachers. So they will all be helping us out in that model.
And again, that's why the state program for running the full remote is an attractive option, just because of staffing and funding. We don't have the ability to hire additional staff to run a full remote program for those 12% of the kids potentially. So if the state's doing a lot of that curriculum delivery work, and then it's our staff checking in with them, making sure that they're making progress and doing some of the social emotional learning pieces, that makes it more manageable within the staffing limits that we have. That really is already, it's our biggest challenge, is we have teachers that need to stay fully remote, but then there's no budget for long-term substitutes to necessarily backfill for them, because there hasn't been a significant influx of funding, right? Which is then just my one political statement of the federal bill that you keep hearing about potentially in the bailout is another key piece of how we're really going to make all of this work.
Okay, all right. And then the other thing I want to ask is Mark Carleo, the Department of Health, Danvers head of the Public Health Department. Is he on board with the hybrid? Does he feel it's workable? Whoever wants to take that.
Yes, he's part of our
Yes.
reopening committee and
Yep.
has been privy to all the information, and he is on board.
Okay, all right, good. So I think my thoughts are right now that the one number that I first look at is the fact that 84% of the parents that responded want their kids to physically go to school, whether that be full-time or hybrid. And is I think you've made clear and Eric's questions made clear, at this point in time, full in person is not, it's not realistic. And so I'm not one that I think will ever substitute my judgment for the determinations on health and safety of the parents when it comes to the kids. So the parents are comfortable right now. And again, this is a moving target and it may change. And that's why we have these plans so that we can pivot when we have to. But right now, the parents feel comfortable with their kids going to school. I think that the plans that we've brought up, that we've shown tonight, and are workable. We've I think been smart to keep the distances is up to the 6 feet. And so again, when it comes to health and safety, I don't want to be the one here saying, you're wrong. We don't think it's safe. You're not ready to make that decision yet. I just think that's an important thing to take care of. And in the end, by the way, I think, and I'm only comparing myself to Eric because he's the only one that spoke about. I think Eric and I agree pretty much probably on most of this, except for the fact that I think he wants to start remote first and see what happens, and I want to start hybrid first and see what happens. The good thing is that we do have the ability to pivot and do what we need to do as we go through this. And so the way that I came to what I think here is, again, based on what I see right now. Number one, we take what the parents think. Number two, I'm looking at, what is the climate? What are the facts in Massachusetts right now? So right now, the facts are pretty good. And so as they are in our surrounding states, especially when you go to New Hampshire, Maine, and Vermont, where it's really, really low as far as the test. But I mean, look at the state indicators. The positive test rate is gone up a couple of percentage points, but it's 93% down from where it was on April 15th when we were talking about what we were going to do with the rest of the school year. It was 35% back then. It's 2% today. Hospitalized patients are down 90% from mid-April. Deaths are down 91% from mid-April. And of course, as always been the case, 60 to 70% of the deaths are nursing home patients, nursing home people that live in the nursing homes. So my feeling is that if this is what the situation is now, if we don't try to get these kids back in school now, then what I think we're saying is that they're not going back to school until we have a vaccine or there is 0 cases. And that is something that I cannot support, because I think it's unquestioned that the kids are better off being in school. Take the virus away. The kids are going to learn more. They're going to have a better experience. They're going to become, they're going to advance more when they're in school, not at home. Otherwise, we would have come up with remote learning a long time ago, and that's what we would do all the time. Also, we talk all the time about social and emotional learning, and I don't think being home by themselves on a computer or doing work is helping with the social and emotional learning, nor do I think it's good for kids that have issues that come to light when they are in the school. We have spent the last few years constantly talking about social emotional learning, and that's important, obviously. So I think that as it stands now, if the cases skyrocket in the next 3 weeks, then I'm going to say that we need to not start this way. We need to start with remote. But as it is right now, I think that this is a good way to go. And I think what I'm hearing is that if we see trends that are not good in the third week of September, we can flip to remote very easily, seamlessly, let's say. It's never going to be easy, but seamlessly. And then if things get better in a month after that, and again, who knows, we can't predict the future. We can go back to the hybrid, and we may go back and forth, and that's fine because you're still keeping the kids connected with the school and connected with the teachers. I'm also happy that, and I know this is not a comment on what we did back in April, May, and June, because again, we were learning on the fly. But I'm also happy that and that's why I asked Mary you the questions. I'm also happy that we have what looks to me like a robust remote process that we can now put into place. I'm also, like Eric, interested to know what the state is coming up with for this full-time remote. I mean, that's, again, things pop up, new things pop up all the time, and I really would be interested to see what this is all about. The other thing, going back to the 84%, is the 16% that don't want their kids to go right now. I respect that too, and the fact is that they don't have to have those kids in school. So, and we have the ability to take care of them too. So, so right now, I'm in support of what we're leaning to, and I think that's where I want to be right now. And as long as we have the flexibility to move, then I think we're doing what we can, and I think that this is good. I think where we are right now is good, and we'll just have to keep track of this. And I think our hourly wage for being on school committee is going to really reduce a lot because we're going to be spending a lot more time over the next few months on this. But that's okay. That's what we're here for. And like I said, all we care about is making sure that the kids are getting the best that we can provide them under the circumstances. And I think the one thing I can say about, first of all, our committee, and also for you guys as administrators, I know that's all that we all really care about. So that's what I have to say right now. And I'll be looking forward to more next week.
You saying we don't get overtime, Arthur?
And I guess not. Yeah, we get time and a half, Eric.
There you go.
Excellent. Great. Thanks, Arthur. I appreciate it. Jeff, you're up.
Great. All right. So yeah, I want to thank the committees that have worked on this as well. I mean, I kind of say in particular the teachers and the staff who have participated in this, right? Because this is a day-to-day sort of process for them. They're the ones who have to really juggle a lot of expectations, right? Not only as teachers, but as parents and everybody else. So I mean, I definitely appreciate kind of what they've done. One question. So we talk a lot about sort of going back, if you will. Okay, we're going to start with a hybrid model, and if things get worse, we're gonna go to full remote, and we've got plans for that. What is a scenario where we go back full time and everybody's in person?
It would be with all of the safety measures in place, and in reality, it probably is not until there's a vaccine. I mean, it's not. Don't have that crystal ball piece of it to take a look at that. But when we look at why we need the three models, is because we need to have the social distancing, and we've done the feasibility studies. We've looked at the data for our community, so that looks at 6 feet, and that really is right. Everywhere you go right now, everything is looking at 6 feet. So as long as that's there, I believe it would be the between hybrid and remote, and it's not until the state gives us the okay to move forward with something different that we could go to a full in-person 5 days a week for all of our students.
So the state is the one that is saying 6 feet, or the CDC is saying 6 feet?
Thank you. The CDC has the 6 feet in there. I would say overall in the state, if we think about other sectors other than education, and when we go out to a store, when we go, if you have to go into the pharmacy, that you see the 6 feet pieces, that so we're sort of have that in our mind. The state has looked at and working with the pediatrics, American Society for Pediatrics, doctors is that you could go to a minimum of 3 feet, so we looked at that in the feasibility study of that 3 to 6 feet. We could, in our classrooms, we could get to 4.5 in most of our classrooms. But again, staying with the more of the standard, the more the conservative piece at the 6 feet is where we are now.
Okay. So that makes sense. I agree with that. And I guess there would be time for the vaccine to have to roll out if we get it this year. I mean, realistically, you're not looking until January, February anyway, for a vaccine. And then, you would have to, I'm assuming we'd have to have some validation that students and staff have actually taken the vaccine, much as we do current inoculations, correct? Where you've been, you have to prove to go back full time, something like that. Okay, that makes sense. And I mentioned this before a little bit in terms of the preschool students, but given the 6 feet requirement, there is no additional infrastructure we can rent, we can use. I'm thinking I don't know what's in Danvers, to be honest. Open warehouses, open anything for to maybe let some students back, like a preschool or some elementary schools or anything like that. I mean, and I know they're doing tents down south and things like that, but any possibility of any of that?
I think again, it comes back to finances, right? So at the moment we have our budget that was approved by the town at town meeting, and we're thankful that the state revenue targets, at least through October 31st, they've come in saying that it'll be level funded to FY20. So that makes it that our budget was actually balanced, that we passed, which we weren't sure on. And then the town got some CARES Act money, and the school got some CARES Act money, but the extent of ours was about $500,000, but we had to go out and buy 500 student desks, and we had to buy masks, and we had to buy gloves and all the PPE. So we've gone through already half of our money, and we haven't even started the school year. So there's just not the funding available to go out and try to rent these open spaces.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Yeah, I didn't know if it was an economic issue, if we didn't in Danvers have the space, if it's logistics, but clearly renting the square footage that we would need would be cost prohibitive. So I understand that. On some of the scheduling, is there a possibility we keep students in the same family on the same schedule, even between different schools, or what would that look like?
That is the goal, is to keep families on the same, especially. We've talked a little bit about how we would break that up, and to put out a survey. We would also be looking to balance transportation, to balance fun club, to balance the YMCA program, all as they're trying to socially distance as well. So we'll kind of put out a proposal to parents with, if you answer yes to this question, it could change what schedule you're assigned to, and then give them a box for special requests if they have extenuating circumstances.
Okay, because I would imagine
do the data sorts and see how it all shakes out, right? We can't make any promises to any family about any particular days, but we will do our best to meet the needs.
That was exactly where my next question was. It would say I have a student, a high school student, who says, well, I'd really rather have, Thursdays and Fridays remote learning, and I'll go Mondays, Tuesdays. And, but you're in a physics, 101 class. You can't, I don't know that you're going to have that flexibility for, certainly not choosing your days, but I think we're going to have some sort of default for students, like you said, unless there is some extenuating circumstances, correct?
Right. And then when we do that survey, we're going to be asking them to commit to whether they need the busing and whether they need those other pieces that are some of those defined extenuating circumstances, to then balance it and inform families as quick as we can about what their assignment is.
Okay. Assuming there's a remote model, or even for the hybrid model to a certain extent, is there going to be some sort of guidance or requirement of a minimum amount of live in-person instruction versus sort of sharing videos, or because some of the feedback in some of the comments was, there was a lot of videos shown, and some of the follow-up is difficult, but that instructor time where it is live and the students are live and that interaction seem to be more favorable. Is there some sort of requirement or guidance on that as well for classes?
No,
See, that's what the committees are working on now. Go ahead, Mary, you can.
No, I don't think there's any guidance on that in the from the Department of Ed on like the balance of it, but they do recommend that we do have a balance of synchronous and asynchronous for families. So, and again, we really are working on trying to move all kids forward, and the best way we can do that is in having, you know, 3 or 4 kids on a video session at any time with the teacher for remote. If we have 20 kids on a video, they can't all talk at the same time. They can't all share their ideas all together. So we're really working on really zeroing in on what kids need and trying to move them along.
Good.
And the teachers are really working their full workday, right? So all employees, if we're in a remote model, are working a full remote day versus again in April, May, and June when this was all new and we were all settling in and dealing with this, it was a little bit different, that the expectations will be more for this year.
Yeah, that was my thinking too on just the logistics. I mean, that planning time for teachers is going to be huge, particularly on Wednesday. Hopefully Wednesdays is a good day for them to do that. But I could just imagine you're having to plan between live and virtual and what groups of 4 students, and then students are going to move, and they're going to need as much time as possible. So absolutely support that. The last is sort of a comment that I would say, something that would be helpful, because I've seen some companies do this, is, you know, we've got our own sort of expectations and our commitment to the community to you know, keep the kids safe, keep the teachers safe, keep the staff safe. I would just ask maybe, you know, if we could publish something similar for families and for students, right? So set an expectation that says, you know, you will not, you know, send a student to school who, you know, has a fever or has an issue, right? You know, we will wash your hands. And I know we're talking about training and different things like that. So, you know, what can parents do and caregivers do to make sure that, you know, they're doing everything they can to sort of help the community in this case? Because I think everybody shares a responsibility to make this work. I mean, everybody on these committees are doing what they can, but it's going to take all of us to make this work, right? And so if we just set those expectations up front, then I think it would be, you know, it would definitely go a long way. So, and it looks like maybe we're not going to have any snow days this year, right? So it's impossible to have a snow day. Is that fair?
It is.
Good, good. All right, book the last day of school then. All right, that's all I have. Thanks, Dave.
Dave, can I ask one more question?
Sure, go ahead.
And I meant to ask it before, but I forgot. What are our surrounding districts looking
Sure, you steal my question, you can ask it. Go ahead.
Every district is in the same, you know, going through these same conversations. So I think until the school committees all review this and do their final vote, nothing is final. The regional superintendents for the North Shore Superintendents Roundtable, we have been having ongoing conversations and talking about the hybrid, talking about what that could look like. Can it fit within 1 week? So lots of those questions, I think we'll see some variations of that, but it really depends on from our state conversations with the commissioner to then regional conversations with our roundtables as superintendents, and Mary and Keith work with their colleagues as the assistant superintendents, curriculum directors. We have our principals talking with other principals. All of those conversations come back to your own community's context. And I think that's what the commissioner is doing with tomorrow's submission and why it is particularly short. So that way the state can get on, you know, for July 31st, a snapshot as to where each school committee is leaning toward with their school administrators and central office, where we're leaning toward with our community.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Eric, did you have any follow-up questions?
Just one. I know that the MTA, I think officially today, took the position with the governor that they believe we should start remotely. Has the DTA taken a specific position, or do they intend to? I know they've been working as part of the opening committee with y'all, but do you know if they're planning on taking any kind of official vote or position, or no?
I think that would be for our DTA to share. The pieces is that again, we greatly appreciate the relationship and the
Mhm.
professionalism in our collaboration with our DTA. So, Eric, as you said, our DTA president and vice president are part of the reopening, as well as our teacher aides and our administrative assistants. They have their rep working with us on the reopening too. So they're all part of the conversations, just talking about all of the different options that we have. And that really will be the next step also, is then going back and working with our unions once we have some of
Okay.
this more definitive direction that we're moving in.
Okay, so if I hear you right, after the final plan is approved, there might be discussion with the DTA as a union versus just the reps.
There's been ongoing, right? We not only have reopening, but we have ongoing communication, just as we did during, I mean, that's always been a practice that with
Sure.
central office in our leadership, to have those ongoing weekly communications. We did that during the quarantine, and then also now we continue to do that as we work through the summer on the reopening.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Arthur actually covered a tremendous amount of what I wanted to say. I think it's really important that we look at what the surveys told us. What I didn't hear was how many people took those surveys, both from a faculty perspective and a family perspective. I know the numbers were really high, and I think you sent them to us, but just for anyone that's watching, do you know what those numbers are?
Yep, so I can see Mary looking at her computer now. She'll be able to give it to us in just 1 second. And we have left them open so that way, if Mary just looks to give us the most up-to-date information.
I just think it's really important because a lot of people participated, which we don't get very often. We're in very unique circumstances, but it's really good to know that people are trying to make their voice heard.
So we have 2,453 families or people responding to the family survey. And we have around 410 people responding to our faculty and staff survey.
Okay. Those are obviously much higher than we've ever had in any survey ever before that I can think of, which is great. And again, anyone can be expressing their views, and this might come down to a situation where we're told what we can or cannot do by the state. I know that's still a potential. But I would agree with Arthur in the fact that, if 84% of our respondents from family members want their kids to go back to school, I think, we all want our kids to go back to school. I shouldn't say it that way. But if they're saying that, it's that important to them, because of all the benefits they'll get from being in school, I would agree with that leaning at this time as well. Again, that could change if the numbers change and anything else, changes. But we also have that option for families that want to do 100% remote. So no one is going to be forced to go to school in this environment. So I think that's important to note. I was going to ask the same question about what our other communities are doing on the North Shore. My other note that I had here, and we talked about this a little bit, was whether we're full-time remote or whether we're hybrid, for that remote component, I think it's critical that we have accountability in there. I know in the spring, the state said, no, you can't have accountability, you can't do grades, you can't, do that. And I think we, as a state, missed some opportunities there. So having that accountability is critical. Then the only other thing, again, the presentation was great. The videos I didn't find particularly helpful. I don't know if anyone else did. I think maybe if there could be some narrative that goes with it. Just seeing a bunch of empty chairs didn't do anything for me. So I don't know if that would confuse the public. Maybe it was just me.
No, we can, I realized as watching them as well that this time that it wasn't as clear as we were hoping it to be. So we can take another crack at that for maybe next week's meeting.
Okay, that'd be great. And maybe, since we're, again, if we decide to lean towards the hybrid model, it might not be a factor because we don't need to look at a 3 or 4.5 foot, chair spacing because we're going to go 6 or more.
Right. So I think that would be, as we talk about that more next week, is showing just the 6-foot videos and really
Yep.
just showing some of the different classrooms will be helpful.
I think that'd be great. That was all my questions and comments. Dr. Dana, I know we had a few emails come in, and I don't know if others have come in during the meeting. Again, some of them are probably asking for lots of detail, which we probably don't have, or maybe asking questions about specific circumstances that it might not make sense to respond to in this format. But do you want to cover some of those?
Yes, thank you. I'm just going to take a moment to go back to my email. I think what would be most productive this evening is to give a recap and paraphrase some of what has been given to us, but I'll go through each name that has put in this. And what I would ask is that we will reach out to each person with those questions. Some of the questions we won't be able to answer until next week. All of the questions help us to make sure that our plan going forward is as clear as possible to share with the community. So we have about 15 teachers who reached out through the info@danvers.org this evening, and I'll go over those in just a moment. And we have about 24 to 25 parents that reached out with some specific questions. So I feel like when we do a DESE phone call and going back to the questions and someone from DESE tries to pull together all of the pieces there. So we have Alice Campbell, a parent, and she had asked some questions regarding about the hybrid, what resources would be available to parents, the rep program, the fun club, IEP testing, specialist, and again, resources for parents, which we'll be able to answer within the next week. We have Nicole Kinney is also a parent, an elementary parent, and some questions looking at the air quality in our buildings, the HVAC systems, environmental health, assessment, health and safety, which we are working with our DPW, and that will be part of the final plan, also with updates about the HVA system as we look at reopening schools during the school year. And then the hybrid model again. So lots of questions that had to do with the hybrid model and the responsibility. So all of that will be coming with the additional details there. And looking at additional input, we would also ask that people continue to email. We will continue to call people back, have individual conversations. And as has been stated tonight, the surveys, with that high response of the surveys, that did give us the opportunity to get as many voices as part of this. And then the additional conversations and additional emails help to flesh out that entire picture. I do want to say that also during this evening, our DCAT apologizes that we had 2 links because we're doing one meeting right after another, and put out next week's link. So it did take some time for some people to get caught up with us. So we do apologize for that. It will be, again, it's all recorded and would be on demand. So any part of the meeting that was missed could be reviewed. And again, the whole presentation will be on our website tomorrow. We also have Kristen Malaki, a parent, and she was asking about the Google Classroom. And I'll also go back because we have a couple emails as I just go through the email list. Also, a parent earlier today, Kristen Holmes, and she is asking more about what if we had a case, and that is a guidance from the Department of Education that we continue to review and will be part of our protocols for returning to school. So now I'll start with the ones that came in during the meeting, and I'll just go in the order that they started to come in at about 7 o'clock this evening. We have John Gardner and incoming kindergarten parent asking about the hybrid model, about the detail about kindergartens and their interactions and the use of technology devices. So we'll be able to answer that as we move forward. We have a teacher, Tiffany Tamilio, asking for opinions about the hybrid model. The other thing that I want to state is school committee will see all of these. So between Keith, Mary, and myself, and our 5 school committee members, they will receive the emails of all of this. So to see word for word from our community this evening. So research about families that live in multi-generational housing. And again, how do we help to minimize the risk of our teachers, faculty, and our staff members as we bring adults and children back into school? We have one of our teachers, Pamela Foss, with, again, looking at communication, verbal and nonverbal, essential, a lot of the logistics. So looking at here in this email, a lot of the logistics of the 6 feet, hearing each other, the use of the mask, and the use of the Google Doc. So all of the details that will be forthcoming. Laurie Anketel, a high school teacher, but one of our teachers in the district. Favorite part, face-to-face interactions and missing that. Questions about the hybrid model. Again, the building with the ventilation in a MERV factor. And again, Keith and the DPW are working on that to be able to provide up-to-date information about our HVA system and also about cleaning products. Our DPW, again, has been side by side with us moving through the reopening pieces and has all of that information. And then again, all the things that we're working on with scheduling and how do we move students through the hallways and having those protocols within our buildings. Okay, next, teacher Jen Dennett, an elementary specialist, concerns about the ventilation, the wearing the mask. Okay, and then for our youngest learners, thinking about, again, the balance between our social and emotional and having, when we have all of the safety and social distancing protocols in place, how does that work, and the effects back and forth for students where it would not be the same school as what we left back in March. Amy O'Connor, a teacher in the district, also a parent, so she comes from that perspective in writing her email to us, thinking about movement breaks. And for example, at Riverside, having a sensory path, the students needing those breaks and movement during the day, and what would that look like as we come back to school with the social distancing in the smaller cohorts. Laura Bailey, a teacher in the district, can schools guarantee teachers won't be held liable when a student gets sick, and about sanitizing and maintaining our spaces. We have a teacher, Alana Kellard, reaching out to us and describing the, could we please describe in detail the in-person, what that would look like with the hybrid, remaining in one space, looking at the use of the Chromebook throughout the day. So again, all of those details coming within the week. Next, we have teacher Todd Butterworth, and also a parent of elementary children, and agreeing about not believing that in-person learning is a wise decision at this time. So question, why should we send our students to school when they won't be able to benefit from the traditional peer and teacher interactions and will be doing remote learning in the classroom instead of safely at home? Okay, next. We have teacher Sarah D'Amato, and as a specialist in student services, close contact with some of our students based on their age, need, or level of disability. District providing full PPE, including mask, shields, and scrubs. So all of that, again, is coming of what we will have for all of our teachers, and then the extra PPE for teachers in different classroom situations, depending on the children that they are working with. We have next is a parent, Jennifer Buse, and I believe we'll have another one from her too shortly, saying that St. John's Prep has released their plan, including Zoom room technology. So she's asking about our technology, and then also asking about mask requirements, and the difference between what it might, again, different types of mask and what might be acceptable. So all of those details to come in the next week. Next, we have a parent, Suzanne Tibbetts, and looking at parents as essential workers who are unable to work from home or unable to take their children to work, and sharing that experience there. So we have those questions. And again, reminding us that not everyone has the flexibility to work from home. Next, we have a parent and of an elementary student, Diana Britannic, and I apologize if I did not pronounce the last name correctly. Address transparency. Okay, again, I think looking at what if there was a case, being able to also the options of switching to remote learning if things were to change. So we'll be able to describe that. We are hoping that parents would stay, if they go into the full remote, would stay with that for a while, but we understand the fluidity of both of the models there, and the flexibility and again, that collaboration throughout the school year as our core values. And next we have a parent, Amy Keefe. Will siblings be kept together in the same rotation? Yes. And what will happen with kids under IUP? All of that will be explained in the long plan coming up in the next week. Again, parent Jennifer Muse, and
Lisa, I don't know if you need to necessarily go through all of them, now, because I know there's a lot more questions than we have, definitive answers to at the moment. This tonight was designed to be an overview of where, the district is leaning. And I know you guys have a lot of those plans, in the details of those plans, but maybe not, at the tip of your tongue for every single scenario. And everyone who has a child in the district is going to have a different scenario. So,
yes.
Unless you see something maybe that jumps out at you that you really think we need to cover, I think, knowing that we're going to have all these details in next week's meeting is sufficient.
Perfect. Thank you. So again, I think we have about 15 teachers that sent us an email, and we have about 25 parents that sent us the email. We will review all of them, and I think the ones that I have been able to read give the trends, the concerns, the questions that are out there right now. And as Mr. Thompson just said, all of those details will be coming in the next week. Thank you.
Sure. And I know all of the school committee members have been getting emails. I think I've been getting more since I'm chair this year, which is fine. And I just want to say, Dr. Dina, you've done an amazing job responding to the emails. Your willingness to set up phone calls with parents and anyone that has concerns to try and answer their questions to the best of your ability has been great. So I encourage people to continue to reach out and know that they can have access to the superintendent and get their questions answered. Might not be the answer they want. We might not know the exact answer, but at least, you're perfectly willing and happy to have those conversations. So thank you for doing that. All right, moving on, unless anyone else has any questions before we do. I guess our new business is to vote on the initial plan, the plan of how the district is leaning, which is the hybrid model. We can take either a formal vote or just agree that we're going to move forward with your recommendation. Does anyone on the committee have a specific feeling one way or the other?
Well, my thought, Mr. Chairman, is if I think you know where I stand. I think Arthur and yourself, you kind of said, Jeff, are you on board with the hybrid model?
I am on board with the hybrid model. Yep, absolutely.
All right, then, Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to, make an amendment. And so I think it's fair to say there's a consensus, especially at this point. Feel free to move forward without a vote. I don't feel like we have, at least personally, I don't feel like we have to have a vote.
No, I would agree with you, Eric. I think, as long as we have consensus, like we've done on other things in the past, we can move forward in that manner with our official vote coming next week with the more formal detailed plan.
Thank you.
So Dr.
Thank you
Dana will go ahead and do that.
Thank you very much. And again, first thing in the morning, we will have our website updated with the presentation and the plan that is being submitted to DESE, and Mary will be submitting that for us through the form that we need to do that first thing in the morning also. So I think, Mr. Chairman, the last thing for today's agenda was to review the committee appointments, the subcommittees for school committees, so that way we do have policy coming up and negotiation types of pieces. So
yes. And no one had reached out to me, as we talked about in our last meeting, or even I think the meeting before that, about changing. I know on the agenda is the list of subcommittees. So unless anyone has an objection, we will move forward with that list.
Fine with me.
Fine.
Fine.
Okay, great. So we'll move forward with that subcommittee list and liaisons for the school year.
thank you.
I know we're getting close to wrapping up here. Before we do, I just wanted to remind everyone again that Danvers High School graduation is Saturday morning. This is a very, very unique year. I don't think we've ever had graduation in August. Usually, it's early June. But I think the district has done a really good job of listening to the class of 2020 and trying to grant their wish of having an in-person graduation. I was at one of the practices this morning. It looks like everything is set up really well. Dr. Colombino and Mr. Emberley look like they have everything set up for a great day. And graduation is supposed to be a day of celebration, a day to honor the accomplishments of our graduates who have worked really hard. And, it should be an extra special day of celebration this year. So thank you to everyone involved with making that happen. I truly appreciate it. Having a graduating senior myself, it means a lot. And I know it means a lot to the class. So thank you.
Dave, can we just do one quick reminder as well that due to everything going on, that it is a socially distanced graduation and it is a ticketed only event, but it will be streamed live on YouTube and on DCAT. So we encourage everybody to watch from home who's not one of those invited guests.
Right. Excellent point, Keith. Thank you very much. That is all true. Thank you. So our next meeting is next Thursday, August 6th. The primary agenda item is to vote and approve the final plan for the 2020 school year. Anyone have any other thoughts or comments before I entertain my favorite motion of the night? Who would like to make my favorite motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right. I guess we need to officially take a vote for that. For all those in favor, Arthur Skarmas,
Yes.
Eric Crane,
Yes.
Jeff Kay,
Yes.
And I am in favor as well. So thank you, everyone. Thank you again to the administration and everyone involved in working so hard this summer to get all of this work done. It's greatly appreciated. So thanks again and good night, Danvers.
Thank you.
Good night.